and welcome to Keep the Channel Open, a podcast featuring conversations with artists, writers, and curators. My name is Mike Sakazagawa, and this is episode 53. Today's guest is Eleonora Ronconi. Hey folks, so it's Thanksgiving this week, and I don't know whether you're feeling thankful right now. I think, there's a lot going on, and if you can't muster up feelings of gratitude, I get it. But for me, I find it useful to try and turn my face towards the positive, not as a way of ignoring or minimizing what's bad in the world, but just as a way of maintaining my own peace of mind, and trying to feed myself, to keep myself going so I can keep working on what needs to be worked on if I'm able to help. This is something that my wife and I talk about with our kids a lot, gratitude. I'm not sure exactly when we started doing this. Our oldest is 9 and our youngest is 3. But anyway, for a while now, we do a thing every night when we have dinner. We go around the table and say what we're thankful for. Sometimes, the 3-year-old gets a pass, but everybody else has to think of something, even if it's just something small. Like, I don't know, sometimes one of the kids will be thankful for getting to watch TV, or one time one of them was thankful for ketchup, just like the existence of ketchup. Stuff like that. Lately, every night, I've been starting with the same few things. I'm thankful we're all here. I'm thankful that we're all safe and healthy. Sometimes I have to say relatively healthy. I'm thankful for the food that we're eating, and then I'll pick something for my day, something small that went right. Maybe getting to read during my lunch break, or getting a chance to have a conversation for this show, just something. And there's always something. Even on a really bad day, there's always at least one thing, even if it's only just that the sun came up or I had a nice cup of tea. And, at the risk of sounding a little corny, I just wanted to say right now, I'm thankful for you, the person listening right now, and I'm thankful to everyone who has taken the time to talk with me. I'm just thankful to have the opportunity. Getting to do this show is one of the joys of my life, so thank you. Today's guest is photographer Eleonora Ronconi. Eleonora Ronconi is a photographer born and raised in Buenos Aires, Argentina, now a resident of the Bay Area. Her work has been exhibited around the United States as well as internationally, has been featured in publications like Lens Scratch, Fraction Magazine, Aesthetica Magazine, and La Journal de la Photographie. I first came to know her work through the Six Shooters Project. That is a collaboration that ran from 2012 to 2015, in which 6 photographers made a running photographic conversation, each subsequent image responding to the one previous. I then saw more of her work through those features on Lens Scratch, including 2 of her series, Once Upon a Time and Serás Mis Ojos, both of which you'll hear about in the conversation and which I've linked in the show notes. And I do recommend taking some time to check those out before going ahead, if you have the chance, not if you're driving or whatever, but, if you've got the computer open in front of you, just give them a look. See, it'll provide a nice little context for the conversation. So let's get started. As always, if you're on Twitter, you can use the hashtag ChannelOpenPod to join in the conversation. And now here's my conversation with Eleonora Ronconi. So how are you today?
I'm well, thanks. How are you doing?
Pretty good.
I'm still jet-lagged, but it's okay.
Yeah, you just got back from Paris. How was that?
Oh, it was great. It was a great experience. Paris, to me, is one of the most, beautiful cities in the world. And there is so much culture. I mean, there are so many things to absorb that it's really overwhelming. But it was great.
So you were there for Paris Photo and something else too, right?
Yeah, we were in Photo Fever.
Okay, yeah. So and then you were showing work there?
Yes.
So which work were you showing?
The latest series, Serás Mis Ojos.
Okay.
Yeah, the one you've seen around. Around.
Yeah. I just that's the one you were showing at Medium this year as well, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that series I really like it a lot. Before we get into that one, I always try and think of like how I first encountered someone's work when I'm going to talk to them for the show.
Yes.
And I think that the first time I ever saw your name was via the Six Shooters project.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
We had that for a while. I think as the whole project took about 4 years, and I think I was part of it in the last 2. And so that it was on Facebook, and then we published the blog where you could see the website. That was a very interesting project.
Yeah, I've had a couple other people on the show that were also involved with it. Aline, obviously.
Yes.
And then some of the guest photographers, I had Andy Schreiber and Jennifer McClure on as well.
Yes, for a while, one of the shooters was traveling and not available. So we found, we thought about people who covered temporarily, and both Jen and Andy posted photos for a few weeks.
Yeah. It's such an interesting project. It's one of the things that I really love about this thing is this project, and when it was going on, was one, how it sort of it seemed very sort of community-ish, community-oriented, like this group of people getting together to do a thing, and also how you could make interesting connections between images that weren't made to talk to each other initially. I just thought that was so interesting.
Yes, it was actually, thank you. It was actually very challenging because we couldn't photograph for this. All the photographs that we post had to come from our archives. Mm-hmm. So it was very interesting and challenging to go through, the huge amount of photographs that we have and just find a connection somehow. So it was very, very, it also opened your mind a ton, because you just had to find things where you just wouldn't otherwise. Mm-hmm. So I thought it was very, very interesting too. I was very happy when I was invited to participate in that.
How did that come about? You're getting invited to do that.
I knew Aline, of course. Aline is, our common thread always. She's such a huge part of the community. She really built a wonderful community, and I think it was also I knew Ashley and I knew Heidi. I knew all of them, and so 2 of them had to leave for personal reasons, and so Bootsy, Holler, and I were invited to participate, and we were so happy when we started. It was great.
Now, you live in the LA area, is that right?
No, I live in the Bay Area.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I thought that maybe everybody that was doing that project was LA based, but I guess not.
Yeah, I'm always the foreign token, because as you know, I'm from Argentina, and
right.
And I am not from LA either. But it's really nice to always get invited to participate in shows and things in LA. So I'm always the foreigner, quote unquote, which I actually am.
Yeah.
The outsider.
Well, so that sort of provides a nice little segue back to Serás Mis Ojos.
Yes.
So this project, in your artist statement for it, let me just pop this open here. You talk about that you've lived in California since '98, but but Buenos Aires remains your home. That's where you're from.
Yes.
I thought, reading this artist statement and looking through these images, just really resonated with me so much, this feeling of being sort of in more than one place at the same time. Go ahead.
And not belonging to any of them, at least to me.
Yeah. It's so, I don't know, I feel like there's something about, not just that, like, I'm not an immigrant myself, but my family going back a few generations obviously was.
Yes.
But I feel like there's something similar about this feeling of sort of being in between worlds. That's very, very, very resonant to me. Even something as simple as just like, I'm from Northern California initially.
Yes, you are.
But now I live down in San Diego, and even that is there's something about that feeling of being away from home that just feels very familiar to me, that I really appreciate about this work. And I also make work that has to do with revisiting my hometown. And I like that impulse. I just I'm always trying to get my arms around it. So being able to see that in somebody else's work, like what that drive is that somebody else can articulate, is always very interesting to me.
Yes, it is. It is it's very interesting. I was thinking about it yesterday, when, I thought what we could talk about. And I was thinking, inspiration is so interesting to me because we all get inspired by different things. It's such a different, we get different feelings from different things, but I think there's something common about that is just, external stimuli and what we always deal with and look at and see. But I think it's also what we carry with us. And I think home is such a huge part of who we are that no matter where we go and where we are, it's always with us. And the smells and the colors and the textures. And it's something that you always carry with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so no matter, how far we are, there are certain things that just don't change. And you always have them with you, even if you want to let go, because some people kind of adjust to places much better than others.
Mm.
But that's for me, it's been difficult, trying to adjust to a place that was not really mine, as I say in my artist statement, and trying to still be who I am, while trying to adjust to something that's not really my environment. And I guess you always go back to your childhood, and you always go back to those textures and smells and what remains in your retina.
Yeah.
That, makes who you are.
Do you go back to Buenos Aires a lot, or?
I do. I usually try to go at least once a year.
Mm-hmm.
Last year was a little bit difficult because my mom got sick, and then my aunt, who suffered from Alzheimer, was very sick, and then passed away. So I had to go back at least 6 times last year. So it was very, very difficult. It's a long trip, and it was very exhausting. But even then, I still try to photograph and try to find something to bring with me.
Mm-hmm. There's thinking about these photographs. One of the things that I think is so interesting. There's a line in your artist statement where it says, like a jigsaw puzzle, the pieces started coming together, recreating my history and journey, reconstructing a life that had begun to feel no longer in sharp focus. And there's something about that I recognize from my own work in my hometown, revisiting my hometown, about being able to sort of use the photographs and the process of photographing to sort of help me figure things out. What I was sort of wondering is how that works for you, like how the process of being separated from the place and the memories, and then how photography interacts with that for you.
I think I don't know if you know this, but for a living, I am a simultaneous interpreter. I'm a conference interpreter. And to me, I started photographing when I realized that I was always talking about other people and expressing other people's feelings when I worked, and not having a voice of my own, and not having not expressing what I wanted, because as an interpreter, you always interpret in the first person. So you become somebody else. And so that's how I started photographing, because I wanted to see for myself and speak for myself and have my own voice. And I think that the photographic process in general helps me helps me channel all those feelings and I guess how much I miss home and trying to find something here that I don't have anymore. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Yeah, it sort of does. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what were you referring to exactly about the photographic process?
Well, I guess what I mean is like there in this series in particular, but actually not just this series. Like you've got 3 bodies of work on your website. This one, and then Once Upon a Time, and then Of Light and Shadows.
Yes.
And there's a theme of memory that runs through all of this work.
Yes.
And I find that photographers in general, like photography as a medium is very related to memory, and photographers seem to almost all be very interested in memory.
Oh, it is, yeah.
But then there's also this thing sometimes where photographers will say, I don't want to take a picture of that. I want to just remember it, kind of thing.
Yes.
Which I always sort of find, it's not incorrect exactly, just like it seems too simple to me, like it's like the relationship between taking the photograph and having a memory are sort of different. And since this work of yours, especially this most recent body of work, is very explicitly about exploring your memories,
It is.
I was just sort of wondering how that works for you. Like, how does taking the photograph, or the act of making the photograph, how does that inform your memories of these things?
I think when I love talking about this. I really appreciate her asking that, because it's something that I always think about. I think when you remember things, even though both are very subjective, taking a photograph of something to remember it and remembering thing itself, they're both very subjective, because as time goes by, things change and then you remember things differently. But I think when you take a photograph of something, you're also reinterpreting that moment. And as time goes by, I think you find things in that photograph that even you were not aware of at the time you took it, or it means something else later on. And for me, photographing things to remember them later, or just just because you want to capture a moment and bring it with you, or just take it with you, it's different from just remembering something. As time goes by, memories change, and you remember things that were not actually the way you remember them, if you know what I mean. And so things change, and then your memory plays tricks with you. When you take a photograph, that's much harder, because the moment is there. And even though you can change, maybe the way you see things change or changes, or the way you experience that changes, I think it's a much more, I'm not sure how to say it. It's a much more vivid memory to you. The other one, I think, fades away. Memories just fade away. But when you photograph things and you photograph things even about memories, I think everything becomes more vivid.
I always find too that, when I'm using the photography as a way of, like for me, I always say I use the photographs as a way to try and communicate something about my experience of life.
Yes.
And that seems definitely to be true of your work as well. I find that when I'm in making the photograph, whether it's I'm working with my hometown or trying to take pictures of my family, that the act of or like being in the mindset of I'm going to take a picture, even if I don't have my camera with me, has sort of enabled me to look at things in a different way.
You do. Yeah, you do think. I agree with you. I think you do things, you do look at things in a different way. And I'm not sure why that happens, but you do. I completely agree with you.
Yeah, and there's something almost like I'm paying more attention even when I don't have the camera with me, looking for the little moments and that I, if I had a camera, that I would be able to capture.
I think also we live in a time where everything is goes by so fast, and we're so inundated and flooded with Facebook and Instagram and things. Everything is so, it's like a click, 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 click. And I think when I photograph, I don't know if this happens to you, when I photograph or when I just look at things just to remember, you're more in the moment, and I think you enjoy things way more, and you're able to stay there with the moment. And I think we're in, during these times that we live so fast, everything happens so quickly, and we're rushing all over the place. I think it's a really good respite. It's a really good place to be, because in a way, time just stands still when you're enjoying and you're looking at the moment that you're in, whether you photograph or not. But I think you just look at it or you enjoy it in a different way.
Yeah.
It forces me to pause. It forces me to stop a little bit.
Yeah. And that's in your work as well. When I look at your photographs, really all of them, all of three of these bodies of work, there's sort of an essential quietness to them and stillness that really comes to the foreground in the Once Upon a Time series, where you're looking at amusement parks, but at night with no people in them, and everything is still. Those are all scenes of, when they're in use. There's always going to be a lot of motion and hustle and bustle and crowd and that kind of thing. But you're photographing these spaces outside of that context, and it really, it does sort of seem slower, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah, it's very interesting because for people who know me, they know I am not quiet and I'm quite loud. I mean, I'm Latin. And so it's very interesting that my photographs are so quiet, and they do look like as if I had stopped time. I took a workshop once with Ed Kashi, whose work I admire so much, and he's an amazing person. And he's a really he's a really good observer. He's very good at seeing things when others can't see. And when he saw my work, he looked at it and said, yeah, this is probably you being quiet, trying to get away from the chaos of everyday life. And that's exactly what it is. It's me trying to find a quiet spot, or even in the photographs from Argentina, with all the chaos that was going around me, I still try to manage. I mean, I don't do it consciously. It's very, very unconscious. But I try to find a hideaway. I try to find my quiet place, and I think photography is the only time where I can do that.
It's this didn't occur to me before. I did know because it's been mentioned in when you've been on LensScratch, in your bios on LensScratch, that you're an interpreter.
Yeah.
And I never really thought about it in this context, but like there's almost a way in which, since for your work, you're constantly having to, like, you can't be quiet as an interpreter.
I cannot.
So the fact that you're doing that in your photographs is like an interesting, it's a contrast. I never thought about that.
Yeah, your mind races because it's just such a quick process, listening, processing, just converting the message into a different language and then putting it out there, and it's so fast that I think it's my time to be quiet and to, especially from my mind, to quiet down and to actually concentrate on what I see. And it's beautiful. I would not picture my life without photographing.
Yeah. One of the things about this, back to the Serás Mis Ojos series that I was thinking about too, is that, we talked about memory and how the photographing sort of helps your own memory and being in the moment and stuff like that. But also you're not just it has that effect for you as the artist, but then also you're taking these memories, these very personal images, and sharing them with your audience as well, which is something that I also find very interesting.
In what sense?
Well, I guess, there's something about the idea of making art out of your life, and especially there's something about these photographs. It's not just the things in your life that you're sharing, but it's almost like all these photographs are of things, right? In either your life or your aunt's life. But the context of the series makes it less about the things that you're shooting and more about, like, this is a memory. So it's like taking something out of your head and then presenting it to the audience. And there's something really fascinating to me about that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's all, the challenge that we have as artists is just to make something personal, universal, so that people can relate to it. I think it's probably, to me, one of the biggest challenges that I have, just to make something that is heartfelt, something that comes out of my heart and it's personal, but yet people can relate to it, because it's, sometimes you see work that it's so personal that you have a hard time connecting with, or the other way around. It's so universal that then just don't get much feeling from it. And so, so general, and it's been really hard, because I really want people to be able to relate to that, either to loss or to family memories. And it's probably, one of the best compliments that I can get, just when I hear people telling me that they are moved, or that they can relate to that, or they tell you their own stories. It's one of the most beautiful things about seeing art or experiencing art to me is when I go to museums or when I see other people's work. It's just to stand there and get feelings and feel something, no matter what it is, even if you like the work or not. But at least get some feeling and being able to connect with the work. And so it's something that, that I think I usually look for when I create work. Yeah.
There's something about, with personal work, I find the challenge for me often is, both as an audience member and as somebody who's trying to do this as an artist myself, is that the subjects of the photograph, they obviously, like when I'm taking a picture of my kids, or if I'm taking a picture of something really detailed about my hometown, the subject of the photograph has a really deep meaning for me, but that the people who are going to view the image aren't necessarily going to have any context. They don't know what my life is like, or who these people are, or that kind of thing. So there's always like a really challenge, a difficult thing to try and translate the emotion that I'm trying to convey when people don't have all of that context. And I was sort of wondering how you deal with that.
Yes, I think I don't know if this happens to you, but sometimes it is when you look at work and then you read the artist statement, the work completely changes for you. And sometimes in a positive way, sometimes in a negative way. So I don't know, that's a struggle I have. I don't know, sometimes it's great to have context, but sometimes I just love to see photographs as what they are without the context. Because then sometimes the meaning changes for you. And while you want to know what the artist is thinking or how the artist is feeling when the work is created, I think it's also nice to put your own spin to it and to, I mean, one thing is just to create work with no context and make it so isolated that you really can't relate to that or not sure what you're looking at when it becomes too conceptual. But I think I think I don't know. I think it's such a part of the experience, such a huge part of the experience, as the audience, to look at art and not necessarily know what the context is. Sometimes I don't need to know what the context is, because the images are so strong and the images are so good that you really don't need the context. I don't know if you agree with that. I don't know if that happens to you sometimes too.
It sometimes does, but honestly, for me, I find, I think this is more just like a thing for me, that it might be a deficiency on my part, that just, I really always want to know what the story is.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
No, I don't think it is a deficiency. I think it's just the way we all look at things differently. I love to know the stories. Don't get me wrong. I do love to know what the story is behind it. But I think sometimes people, no matter what the story is, I think sometimes people put their own story on it, mm-hmm. and on what they're saying. So yeah, I don't know. I think, I agree with what you're saying, but to me, as the audience, I don't necessarily need to know the context all the time.
Yeah. Well, and I think looking at these photographs, because I've looked at these photographs several times now, and I actually looked at them several times before I read the artist statement that you've written.
Thank you,
Mike. And I think that there's, you can tell, or at least I can tell, that that these are images that have to do with that they are personal, that they are something having to do with family, with change. There's there are a bunch of references in the images to youth, whether it's like the little paper boats or the sort of tire play structure or the rocking horse. But then also, those are put in context with, like, there are several images of old books or photographs that have definitely, aged, handwriting, things like that. They're like that contrast. So, I get something from all of those things, but I guess the thing that, like, when I read your artist statement, it really deepened it all for me, because, I got more of having that context of why you wanted to present these things, or at least why you wanted to make the images, that it did make it sort of more meaningful to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks. That's true. I agree with you. It does deepen the meaning of it all, or maybe the depth. Just you get a different depth from the story. But I guess it's just the way that I see, that I photograph. I just capture things, and sometimes we all photograph differently, and sometimes people just know exactly what they're going for, and they photograph things, and they have a shoot list, and I just can't do that. I can't.
I am so jealous of people who can do that.
Me too, and I go, wow, and they have a list. Wow, I really admire that. I just can't. When art becomes, or photography becomes analytical for me, or becomes more mental, I just can't photograph. I take horrible photographs. Really bad, because you can tell that I'm thinking. And so I really, really admire people who can, stage scenes. I really do. I think it's fantastic. I'm terrible at it.
Yeah.
And so when I photograph, I just capture things, and then I put them all together, and then I make an artist statement, and then I realize what the work is about. And so, by reading something, I think I make sense of my own work. I don't know if I'm being, I don't know if I'm being very clear, but
it makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think I think it deepens it, because it just, things start making sense, and so it's a long process for me to make an artist statement, which, I don't know why we have to write our statements. We're all so bad at writing. That's why we're photographers. But it's very difficult sometimes to put words for the work for me. So I have a hard time. So when I write an artist statement, I try to explain why I photograph what I photograph, and so I guess it makes sense that it deepens it for you, because it does deepen it for me. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge with an artist statement for me is always to try and do something that adds to the work without like saying, like, I don't want to explain it too much.
Exactly.
But because you want to leave room for the audience to have their own experience.
Yes.
I think your artist statements do that quite well, actually. You know.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, they really work for me. So.
Well, thanks. Well, it takes a long time for me to write something about the work. It's very hard for me to articulate what I see. It's for me, it's you know, I really admire people who can sit down and write something about the work, and it's maybe because it has to do so much with memory and feelings, and it's not easy to articulate memories and feelings, and to make it universal, you know, and to make it in a way that it's understandable.
Yeah.
And it's relatable. Yeah.
I find that one of the things that makes it a little more complicated for me is, like, just like you were saying, that I'm never really setting out to make a project. It's just sort of like I'm sort of emotionally responding to things.
Yes.
And then I realize there's a project. And then
I operate the same way.
Yeah, and then so the process of describing the work, it's less like you know, I feel like somebody like, I don't know, Gregory Crewdson or somebody, you know,
yes,
could probably say, well, like, since he's planning out every shot way in advance anyway, like, he could know what it is that he's trying to do with it. But for me, and it sounds like for you, it's more like, well, I did this thing. Why did I do that?
Yes. I have to, because sometimes, and I'm a slow shooter, so my projects take a long time, and so, you know, and sometimes, you know, the work evolves, and what you started photographing then doesn't have much to do with what you photograph, you know, a year later. Then it probably has to do with your state of mind and, you know, how you were feeling at the time, just because feelings evolve too. And it's then I have to sit down and put everything together and say, well, okay, what this is really about. And sometimes it starts being something else, and, you know, ends up being about something completely different, because I'm not sure what the work is about at the beginning.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes it usually happens, you know, midway for me. Just somewhere in the middle, I sit down and go, okay, I need to figure out what this is about and why. But yeah, I see Crewdson and all these photographers who just have amazing images that we can, you know, with so much detail, and I really, really admire that. I just can't do it.
I can't either.
Yeah, it would become too analytical for me, and then it would be a terrible image.
Yeah.
Yes.
It would be nice, I think, but
I think it would be amazing, but no, it's just not for me.
Yes. Why don't we take a quick break, and then we can come back and do the second segment?
Sure.
So, for the second segment, I always invite the guest to bring a topic of their own, which can be whatever you'd like to talk about. So, what would you like to talk about today?
I'm not sure do you want to talk about something specific? Just let me know.
Well,
I'm not very good at, you know, I thought, but we did talk about inspiration a little bit. A little bit.
We could talk more about that, though.
Okay, let's talk about more. Yeah, because I find it fascinating.
Yeah. So, like, what about, well, I guess, what about inspiration is fascinating to you? Like,
I think it's how we respond to different things, and how we respond differently to the same things, and we did talk about that a little bit.
Well, I guess one thing that comes to mind is, you know, we were just talking about somebody like Crewdson and how, you know, like one thing that always sort of strikes me about somebody who works that way, who, he spends, hours and hours, maybe days, sort of meticulously setting up a scene.
Yes.
And then just to take, I mean, I don't know if he actually just takes one frame of it, but,
Probably not.
Probably not, but that's at least in theory, right?
Yes.
But he's have to have some idea of what he wants before he builds it, which is very foreign to how I work. And I always sort of I just can't even conceive of how somebody comes up with ideas like that,
Yeah, I think for us, it's, we respond so much to external influences that it stays with you somewhere inside. And I think it comes out as a photograph. You know what I mean? I think it's for me, at least, I mean, I read a lot, I watch a lot of movies, and I think they stay with me somehow. And when I start photographing, I photograph and then I realize that, oh, it has to do with this, or it's probably inspired by this, or I don't know, I love Tim Burton. And I never thought about Tim Burton when I was doing the amusement park series, Once Upon a Time. And then I realized, oh, this really has to do a lot, it has to do with that, or it has to do with something else. But I mean, the inspiration and the way I see or I photograph has a lot, from that. It has a lot of that. And so it's I don't know, I find it very interesting that we keep all these images and colors and things in our heads and in our minds somehow, somewhere, and then they come out in our images. They definitely do. I think for you too, I mean, you make such beautiful, simple images, and there's such a wabi-sabi thing in your photographs.
Well, thank you.
No, but it's true though. I love the pots, the kettles. I think it's just, I mean, it's amazing. It's an abstract, but it's not, because it is an object and you're photographing that. And so, but it can become something else. And so I think that's what I find very interesting, that we're not aware how we keep all these images, in our database, in our brains.
Yeah. One thing that I always sort of think about when it comes to inspiration is, I can't remember who it was. Might have been Picasso had some quotation where it's I believe in inspiration, but it has to find me working.
Yes.
And for somebody like me, when I'm, I always find that I can't force a photograph, just like what you were saying before.
Yes, I can't either. Yeah.
But it does sort of happen sometimes that when I'm having a certain feeling, that I can sort of maybe provide the right sort of fertilizer for the, to sort of get myself in a situation, not where I can manufacture an image, but where I'm just sort of setting things up so that maybe I'll be in the right frame of mind to do it.
Yes.
Is that something that you find as well?
Exactly like that. It is very interesting. Sometimes I grab my camera and I go, okay, I'm going to go out photograph. I have some images in my head. And then they're just horrific because I'm not in the right frame of mind. And it's I don't know what it is, and that's why I find it so interesting. I don't know what it is that makes us click, that makes us go, okay, now, and or just grab the camera and just not even just see something that has nothing to do with what we're actually set out on to photograph.
Yeah.
Especially when we travel or when we just go somewhere. It is very interesting. You have to be in the right state of frame of mind, because if not, then nothing comes out.
Yeah. I always find that I shoot very instinctively, just whenever something sort of catches my eye, kind of thing.
Yes.
And being able to sort of set that feeling up for myself in advance is always very difficult.
Yes, it is very difficult. And sometimes you just grab the camera and you go out there and you just can't see. You can't see beyond what's around you. And I think that for me, the best images are the ones that, there are simple things, but you can see so much more beyond that simplicity. That it looks like it's a simple photograph, but it's actually very complex and has a lot of layers to it.
Yeah. Is that something that you ever find that you're able to do on purpose? Like it has layers when you actually, snap the shutter release, or is it?
No. No, I don't see it. I don't see it that way. No, I can't, because for me, if I started paying attention to the layers and the complexity, then I wouldn't press a shutter, because then it would be so much in my head.
There is something really nice about the feeling of when you're going back through your like you're importing your images and looking through them, and you're like, oh wow, this one came out really nice.
Yes, and usually they're the ones that you least expect to come out really nice.
Yeah.
At least to me, and I think it's because we're not thinking about it, and that's for me the whole process of photographing and seeing. For me, it's just, I have to follow the feeling and how that object or whatever I'm photographing speaks to me. No matter, it can be something very beautiful and very photogenic and very appealing to photograph, but if it doesn't speak to me at a certain level, I just can't photograph it. Then it comes out just as a beautiful thing that says nothing.
Yeah.
That has no meaning to it for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if that happens to you, but it's just interesting how sometimes I can have the most beautiful thing in front of me, and it just doesn't. I just don't feel like photographing it.
Yeah, sometimes my mother-in-law will point something out and say, "You should take a picture of that," and I'm like,
I know. I know, because I think it is, how you relate to the object that's in front of you. I think it's how, it's your own experience, your own perception of it. And sometimes we perceive things very differently. So it is, I find this very interesting. Yes. And sometimes people say, you have to go here, even with art, you have to go here and see this photograph. It's amazing. And then you stand there and you go, it's just the same feeling, or a painting, or I don't know, it has to speak to you. And sometimes, no matter how beautiful it is, it doesn't happen,
It's very interesting, because I find that a lot of times when I'm looking at other people's work, I'll sort of have two paths to ending up where I'm liking what I'm seeing, where sometimes I just immediately we'll look at it and say, well, yes, I like this. And occasionally then I'll get tired of it. But a lot of times, like when I have a really strong reaction, immediately it sticks around.
It does. It usually does.
But also there's work I find, and just to say, by the way, your work is one that I had that sort of immediate, it jumped out at me. It's like, oh, I like this. This is I like this is, I can tell this is something that I'm going to be interested in coming back to.
Thank you.
But
it means a lot.
Sometimes I find work that it's sort of like, well, I don't really get this. Like, what's going on here? And then I sort of have to work my way into it.
Yes, it grows on you.
Yeah.
Yes, I don't know why do you think that is? I've never really thought about it in a deeper way, but I don't know. I guess it's work that's more complex. That at the beginning, sometimes we don't see the layers, and that's what we were talking about before.
I think maybe what it is for me is that when I'm usually when I have an immediate response to something, it's because I feel like there's something about it that I understand immediately, and oftentimes that's because it's either in technique or in subject matter or in emotion. It's something that's very familiar to me that I have experience with.
Yes.
But work that has to grow on me, a lot of times it's because it's foreign to me at the beginning, and I don't understand it immediately, and because but and this doesn't always happen, but sometimes the process of taking time to try to understand it and will lead me to something new, and then that new experience of understanding is something, I guess it's almost like if I see myself, then I immediately react. And if I see, but then the process of getting to know somebody else is rewarding as well. Does that sort of?
I think you described it perfectly. I think it's what we're talking about earlier, the universality, that feeling that you can relate to. And sometimes I think it's not very evident, it's not very clear, it's not out there. It is somewhere at a deeper level, so it takes us longer to find it. But it is there, and maybe it's an intuition thing. Maybe it is something maybe it is a surprise factor, as you said, because you can't understand it. And, as we have inquiring minds, we like to know and we like to understand and we like to know more about it. And so then as we learn about the work, or as we learn how to understand it, then it becomes something else, or it becomes something that we can relate to at a deeper level.
Yeah. There has to be a reason, though, for me to want to do the work in the first place. Like if I don't react to it immediately, then there still has to be something where to sort of draw me in. Otherwise, I was like, what's the point?
Yeah. Well, yes, of course. And we see so much, that has to, no, but it's true, that has to happen. I think sometimes you see work that it is beautiful and that it's really nice, but it's just easy work. And so you look at it and you go like, oh, that's pretty, or that's nice, but it's easy. And so, there's no complexity to it. And I think those are the images that sometimes I like at the beginning, and then they're gone quickly.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing for me to grab onto, to hold on to. While I remember the photograph. And I think that's what happens when things are even though they're foreign and you don't understand them, you want to see more because there are more complex photographs and because or paintings, but there are more layers to it.
Yeah.
And so that's the work that you always keep going back to.
Yeah. So the last question that I like to ask everybody is whether there is a piece of art or literature or just general creativity that you've experienced recently that meant something to you.
I love impressionist work, and when I was in Paris, I went to the Museum d'Orsay. And those paintings always stay in my mind. The light, the composition, the details, those to me are so inspiring. Especially the light. I love seeing light, and to me that's one of my biggest inspirations.
Is there one piece that you saw in particular at the museum this past trip that sort of stands out to you?
No, I've been there before, so most of the paintings that are there, because it's a permanent collection, I've seen them before. I probably end up going back to Monet a lot, and I really love the palette, how subtle it is, and I don't know why, it's one of my favorites. And then on the other hand, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
No, I find it interesting because I feel like a lot of photographers are interested in the Impressionists. Like I often find that I have difficulty connecting with painting, which is interesting because I do of visual arts, but for some reason painting often escapes me. But the Impressionists, for some reason, always, there's something about that draws me in. So, but I've never quite understood what it is that I like about it.
That's interesting. And which one? What is the inspiration for you? What paintings or what art would you be inspired by?
Well, I mean, I like Monet's work quite a bit, and in particular, how he uses color.
Yes.
Yeah, but like I always say, like I always want to talk to more painters for this show, but then I always feel like I don't know what I would say, because I just feel like I never feel like I understand painting.
Well, I disagree with you. I think, your kettle photographs have a lot to do with painting. They look like abstract paintings.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing that's sort of so like for me, like making a photograph of my teacups that, they look like an abstract painting, but then they're actually more or less a direct representation of what was in front of the camera.
Yes.
So there's something sort of fun about that. Whereas I feel like it would be really different if I were just painting it somehow. Like making a painting that looks like a painting seems different from making a photograph that looks like a painting. I don't know.
Yes. I see what you mean. Yes, I get it. But I don't know. I think sometimes, what I was telling you before, sometimes we see a lot of paintings and we have so, much external stimuli that I really think that those images and those colors and the textures stay with us somehow in our mind, and we don't realize until we start creating more work.
Yeah.
And then you understand where it comes from.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, it's quite a science.
Yeah. Well, listen, I really appreciate you taking the time and talking with me. I had a really good time.
Oh no, I appreciate your asking me to talk to you. I had a good time. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so that was my conversation with Eleonora Ronconi. As I mentioned at the top of the show, there are links to her website and individual series galleries in the show notes. If you haven't seen those before, do check them out. And that is our show. If you have any questions or comments, do drop me a line at podcast@keepthechanneleopen.com. I'm always happy to get listener mail. You can also follow me in the show on Twitter @ChannelOpenPod or on Facebook at facebook.com/keepthechanneleopen. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or whatever platform you're listening on. That does help people find the show, and there's a link in the show notes for that. And if you'd like to go above and beyond, you can set up a monthly donation to our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/SakeRiver. That's patreon.com/SakeRiver, sake like the drink and river like river, and there's a link in the show notes for that as well. Monthly pledges in any amount will get you access to each episode a day early, plus an extra entry into any giveaways we do. I'm trying to do more of those regularly these days, and our theme music is by Poddington Bear. You can find more of his music available for licensing at soundofpicture.com. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a new conversation, so stay tuned, and until then, remember, keep the channel open.